everybody. That's Seth Kamens. I'm Sean Palmer, Seth and Sean Sports Radio. You see, we got it right this time.
Fantastic. The only problem is I like the intro, but they should have had you hitting me in the head with the what do you call it, with the beer.
Oh, hold on a second. We can bring that up on the top right. Hold on. Let me get that. Yeah, we can get that in the top right as our logo if we so desire. 1 second. Let me get that.
I just got another Blog Talk Radio invoice.
Awesome.
It's been 6 months.
Okay, so it's in the top right. So that's our new logo. Is me hitting you over with a beer bottle. It's kind of like the baseball bat that I have in back of me. How cool is that? That is the coolest thing I've seen in a liquor store in a very long period of time.
Just because you haven't been outside in 14 months.
Well, that's true, but I went shopping with my brother, and he had a birthday gift, and I saw a baseball bat full of tequila, and I was like, "Oh, that has to come home." It's the journey of driving across the country because you couldn't take that on a plane. So, right. For several.
The fun part was if you hit me with that baseball bat instead of the beer bottle up there, that would hurt a lot more, and I would really smell pretty crappy.
Well, the torque would certainly break it. There's no question about that. Number two is the fact that I didn't even think about it as a weapon. I can't bring that much liquid on the plane. There's nothing else. Like it's a double-edged sword.
We all know you do have some repressed anger.
I do. But it's been an interesting trip here to Arizona. I'm on the Pacific Coast time, but it does look like it's a bright sunny day in New Jersey as well. So
it is gorgeous. It is about 65 out. We went to go look at preschools for the little dude, for the little dudette, I should say. And I'm just working. Got dressed up for the show as I always do. And
you colored the beard?
I wish I colored the beard. This is just what it is. This is what COVID has done to me, you MFers. This is what COVID has done to me.
You know, it's been an interesting 14 months as I see my family, but it is very nice to both get out of the house, get out of Georgia, and to travel the country. And you definitely relish and understand what it's like being outside of your distinct area once you get out there. And yes, it was 1,800 miles to drive here, and it'll be 1,800 more to get home. But at the same time,
you're not going to walk 1,000 miles or 100 miles.
Walk 500 miles. It's
500. Damn it!
Proclaimer song, my friend.
May and June, the Proclaimers, good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should talk sports.
A little bit.
Somewhat. Although, where do we start? Like, we know in 2 weeks we have our NFL draft preview, which I've been running mock draft simulators for the last month because this is what I do at 11 o'clock at night while I'm watching TV. Who do
you come up with on pick 23 for the Jets? Because I'm so curious I'm not curious as to number 2. I'm really not curious as to the first 10 picks of the draft. I think the draft kind of starts after 10.
I think that's certifiably insane.
Why?
The draft starts at 4.
Well, because I think the first 10 picks are basically going to be the first 10 picks.
I think so. I think you have about 13 or 14 picks that can be within the first 10. You got the 5 quarterbacks. It's quick and dirty. You got the 5 quarterbacks.
Sure. Kyle Pitts.
You got the tight end. You got 3 wideouts. You have 2 offensive.
I don't think you have 3 wideouts. I think Waddle goes after 10.
I mean, Waddle is who I've seen going to the Giants more than anyone else.
Right, which is after 10.
Fine, but he's at 11. Dude, he's 11. He's right in the vicinity of.
Okay.
You got Parsons. You got Surtain. You got the 2 offensive linemen, one from Washington, one from Oregon. That puts you at 13 to 14 to begin with.
Wait, who's at Washington?
Well, one from Wisconsin, one from Northwestern. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Slater from Northwestern and Sewell from Oregon.
Right, and I got Sewell in that top 10. I don't have Slater in that top 10. Maybe that's
Slater could drop. He won't be in the top 4, but there are teams that like him more than Sewell.
Sure,
he could go as high as 5. He could go to 10 at Dallas, who has no interior line. Detroit could use a lineman. Detroit could also use a wideout. Miami could use a lineman. And he was the only guy that really shut down Chase Young last year, or 2 years ago, I guess. So there's 13 or 14. Plus, again, what are the teams that I root for? The Giants first, the Jets second, the Bengals third. They're all top 10 picks. I think the Jets go corner at 23. I don't know who your corners are at this point.
So that's a good question because neither does anybody else.
Well,
so the question is whether they sign Richard Sherman later, and because Robert Saleh was his coach last year. Mm-hmm. Look, the Jets, and we'll talk about this more in 2 weeks, but the Jets are not building for next year. They're just not. They're not.
Richard Sherman is not a huge impact one way or the other. You're not going 11-5 next year. So
no, that's true.
The name, if Caleb Farley's back holds up, he's reasonable. Craig Newsome, again, from Northwestern, reasonable. You may go. I don't think you need top front seven on the back end. You don't need front four. You're not going to take a linebacker, I don't think.
Well, you may need front. The only front four you need is a pass rusher, as everybody else does. As everybody else does. There's
the guy. There's
you got the Miami guy.
There's Owen from Penn State. There's the two Miami guys, Phillip and Rousseau.
Yep.
There's one other one, the one from Georgia. Which I forget the pronunciation of his name. You could do that, but as I said, I really don't know who your corners are. I know your defensive line. You have Anderson and you have Carl Lawson that you signed. And your defense in Quentin Williams. I know your defensive line. I have no freaking clue who your corners are.
Oh, you're right, and neither do I. And I would get that.
You got to you're taking one at 23 or 32. I don't know which. I don't know who your preference is. I'm not an expert on which one's going to fit Robert Saleh's scheme, but I just think at a certain point, need is a no-brainer.
Yeah, and the Jets have 2 third-round picks. I think they have 2 fourth-round picks. I mean, they have lower in the draft, but that's when you pick up your running backs, or that's where you pick up your interior linemen more than anything else. Look, they're either going corner with, like you said, 23 or 32. They need a running back, and I was going to talk more along the NFL.
Yeah, you're anti-running back. You don't want Eddie at 32. You've told me this.
Well, I don't know. I don't want him at 23. I don't mind him at 32. I don't want.
I thought you didn't want a running back in the second round either.
Look, if I can get NTN in the third round, I'd prefer him, but he ain't going to be there, and neither is Najee Harris. And I will tell you, if you want to listen to a
listened to it. It was funny.
Listen to Adam Schefter's podcast with Najee Harris. He would be amazing in New York, by the way. That guy would be a star. But let's move on to a little bit of the NFL and some of the signings that happened this week, especially one today, which completely messes up my fantasy league once again. And it happens with James Conner. So James Conner moves over to the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. I thought for the last 6 months that Chase Edmonds, my 13th round pick in the last year's draft, they have been propping him up as the guy in Arizona. And I was totally on board. I was like, I got a 13th round keeper. This is fantastic. And once again, James Conner messes up my fantasy league team. On the wrong end, normally it's James Conner's just not healthy. Now he's going to take carries from Chase Edmonds. But that's a good pickup for Arizona. I like the pickup for the team if he stays healthy. Edmonds and Conner, look, you think Fitzgerald is probably going to retire. You have Hopkins and A.J. Green. You have a 2016 All-Pro team on that team. You just hope that they can survive one more year in a very, very, very tough NFC West.
Probably the best division in football right now. It's interesting who they've done, what they've done. As you said, they picked up A.J. Green, which no one really knows what you're going to get out of him.
And they paid a ton for him. They paid $6 million for a guy that probably should have been at a minimum deal this year, based on production.
He would need a prove-it deal on a 1-year deal. You picked up J.J. Watt for $28 million over 2. I mean, they're doing the 2017 run. we'll see what happens because this is Cliff. I think this is Cliff Kingsbury's, make it or break it year. And if they don't make the playoffs, I think he's gone.
Really?
I do. This is the third year. And they kind of self-destructed a little bit last year at the end. And look, there's a little bit of anomaly. The year was just what the year was. But if not him, there are a lot of people who would like to coach Kyler Murray.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That's certainly true. And then you have some other. The free agency is running dry these days. There isn't a lot there. More importantly, the other sports are picking up steam. You have this may be the 2-week dead period of the NFL. I mean, if there is a dead period, this 2 weeks and like the 3 weeks after the draft are probably the 2 dead periods in the NFL season these days. The NBA is making their run at actually keeping fans. I'd like to do a little comparison with you. If I say an NBA star, I want you to compare him to a person pre-1990. Okay? Let's play this game.
Another NBA player or
another NBA player. Who do you compare these guys to? Because I'm on my way across, and I'll give you why I say this. On my way across the country, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and those podcasts
couldn't talk to me for all 16 hours.
Nope, nor would I want to. Podcasts are talking about the deficiencies in some of these players and the great attributes in other players, and that makes sense. And how the trade deadline panned out, and whether teams have a 2-year window or a 4-year window, or whether you build around this player or don't build around this player. And I was thinking back when they were naming some of these players, and I was like, all right, let's go back in time and compare them to players that used to play. And did those players win championships on those teams? Because if they didn't, then maybe they're not players to build around in a championship environment. And I was like, I was playing this game in my head. So I'm interested in hearing your take on who I'm going to name, and then I'll tell you who I was thinking about. Okay, so the first one was Trae Young. Who is Trae Young to you? Because the Hawks have been a very interesting saga of this year. Trae Young is I think people were calling it a interesting player. And I said, no, to me, Trae Young is a polarizing player. He is either people love him or they don't believe in him. And I kind of fall in the latter category as a guy that you could build around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think who pre-1990, you said?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to maybe a Tiny Archibald.
Well, that's who I was saying. I was actually going Tiny Archibald or World Be Free. Guys that score in buckets and don't do anything else.
Well, Tiny Archibald is the only player to lead the league in points and assists in the same season.
Right, and he held the ball 1,000. His usage rate was more than anything else in history. So I would put another player I would compare him to would be an Allen Iverson. But Iverson was after 1990, and also Iverson was much more of a driver and not just a shooter.
Yeah, Iverson was never a shooter. Iverson was an amazing penetrator. Iverson also was, whether you liked him or not, was a leader. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a not so good way. Yeah. But I don't know Trae Young well enough to know if he's a leader in that regard. The team has been irrelevant, although they've made a nice run this year. But the team has been relatively irrelevant since he came, and he's really been best known as, the guy who was traded for Luka Doncic. Although he has found himself a nice career down in Atlanta. He's kind of that points, assists. I don't really believe in defense. Not going to lead you to the promised land, but can potentially be a third person, a third wheel on a title team, maybe. But the problem is when you're running the point, it's very difficult to be the third wheel on a championship team as a point guard.
Well, part of the discussion on these podcasts and in general is he's coming up for restricted free agency after this year. He's past his third year. And do you offer him a max extension? And if you are the Hawks, I mean, he's coming up on it. He's not there yet. If you're after this year, it's next year. If you're because John Collins is up this year.
Right, but they're not giving Collins the max. They're
Well,
Collins.
but the question is, why wouldn't you give Collins the max? Collins is a player that you could take and build around, and it does. He plays defense. He plays up. He rebounds. He scores. He's a guy that you might want to build around, but he doesn't have the cachet of Trae Young.
They also have other people.
Agreed.
In that 4 or 5. They drafted, I forget who they drafted last year.
DeAndre Hunter is in that spot.
Yeah, Hunter's been a disappointment. Who they drafted, was it Okoro who they drafted?
Yep. And they also have Clint Capella in that spot.
That's what I'm saying. They have Clint Capella. Now that Rondo's gone in Atlanta, they have there is no point guard other than Young. There's nobody else there.
Correct.
Chris Dunn isn't healthy. Herter is a 2-3 swing. Hunter's a 3-4 combo. They have no other point guard. I'm assuming because Young is a pretty popular guy, and puts butts in the seats when it's under normal circumstances. I think they'd have to max him.
But he is not. But to the point, much like you just said, Tiny Archibald, World Be Free, that type of player. Those players didn't win.
Tiny Archibald did win. He didn't win as a number 1. He won as a 6th man.
Right. So he didn't win in his prime. Let's put it that way.
But again, they have brought in some people who could, again, if he's not the number 1, or if there's a really good complementary 2 and 3, whether it's Bogdanovich or is he in Utah? I forget. I always get mixed up.
2 Bogdanoviches. Remember, they're both named the same thing. They're both named the same name.
Okay, so you have Bogdanovich, who's a good scorer. You have Capello, who's a good player. You have talent down in Atlanta. I remember I took Atlanta to make the playoffs last year. I thought it was going to be their year. They made the run to relevancy. It just happened to be this year after they fired Pierce.
Okay, so let me throw another name at you. Okay, Julius Randle. That's a little harder.
A slightly better scoring, not as physically imposing Xavier McDaniel.
Oh, I like it. Who also was not a number 1.
No. Julius Randle is not a number 1 on a contending team.
Okay. Pascal Siakam, who just signed a max deal.
I know. There really isn't anyone from that era kind of like Siakam that I can think of. Because you're trying to think of a stretch 4 for the most part. He's really a 4 who can shoot the 3, can play down low. He's big and he's tall and thin.
How about Loy Vaught?
Loy Vaught barely had a professional career. That doesn't.
Okay, he averaged 18 and 9 with the Clippers, so that's where I was going
for a couple years. But he had no outside game that Siakam does.
Yeah, that's probably true. Maybe Siakam is the new NBA, right? That's OG Abadobi too. He's the new NBA. There's really none of those players that would be there. Okay, Russell Westbrook. Oscar Robertson?
Yeah, there's nobody like Westbrook. Oscar Robertson is the best comp, which considering Oscar Robertson is probably one of the 5 greatest guards of all time is really not a negative.
No, but Oscar Robertson, again, never won as a number 1.
Yes, he did. Well, he won as that's unfair. That was he was playing against the Russell Celtics and the Chamberlain Sixers. Nobody was going to win those. He did win slightly past his prime with Jabbar in 71.
Correct.
similar to Westbrook, he is considered difficult to play with. Unlike Westbrook, Westbrook's pretty well liked in the league, as in Robertson was not. Robertson was brutally difficult to play with, out of what I understand. But they had comparable, they had more of the comparable post up, like the guard post up games that they could play. Westbrook's an athlete beyond anyone we can compare before 1990 as a point guard. There's nobody there.
Okay, and I'll give you the hardest one. I'm not sure there is a comparable to him. Ben Simmons.
Magic.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you're right.
Better defender, not as good an offensive player, not as big of a leader. He's a 6'10" point guard. Who else are you gonna use?
By the way, you just gave me the comp to Pascal Siakam. You want to guess who it is?
Worthy?
Yes. Spot on. Runs the floor.
Different era.
Well,
Worthy
yeah.
wasn't an outside shooter.
Well, Worthy didn't have to be, right? I mean, he was in college. He didn't have to. He was a driver. He played the same position, same type of style. Big game James. Yeah, I think that's your comp right there. I think you got it.
Hopes that if they do that, the Toronto Raptors will be very happy. If he nets out to be James Worthy.
Well, but James Worthy, right? But yes, and if James Worthy was on any other team, would he have been as good as he was? Maybe
he may have been better.
Yeah, he might have better stats.
He may have better stats. He wouldn't have won as much.
Correct.
Like, you can't help but be the third wheel when you're top two of the 10 greatest players of all time, potentially two of the legitimately top 5 best players of all time in Magic and Kareem. You're most likely not going to hit. Well, I look like a cartoon character based on the way the sun's going.
That is true.
So, yeah.
Okay, so right now, you got the 76ers in first, the Nets in second, a half a game behind. The Bucks, the Hawks, the Heat, the Hornets are 1 through 6, and then the play-in game is 7 through 10, which is the Celtics, the Knicks, the Pacers, and the Bulls. I love the fact that the Knicks and Celtics would both be in the play-in round. I think that makes it amazing for the NBA. I think it makes it horrendous for everybody else, but amazing for the NBA getting those types of eyes. Mark Cuban today said the play-in round is one of the worst things that the NBA has. I know you and I have discussed this in years past that would be something we'd want, but we want it in a different fashion that talks to the lottery, not necessarily to the playoffs. Are you a fan of the play-in round 7 through 10?
No, just like I'm not a fan of the first 4 in the NCAA tournament. You have 80 games, 70 games this year, but typically you got 80 games.
Sure.
80 games is sufficient to determine who belongs in the playoffs and who doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't need 83 and 84.
Well, no. Right. Okay.
So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, look, is it fun? Sure. Do I think it's fair? Not particularly, no.
Okay. I do like the way that they do it, though. That's you got to win 2 in a row if you are the lower seed. You got to win only 1 if you're the upper seed. I like the way that they give some advantage.
Look, if you're going to do it, I think that's a reasonable. Look, if you're going to have this extra BS, cash grab kind of things, you have to make it, more fair. Like the first 4, I finally convinced Nabate on something with the first 4.
You convinced Nabate of something?
Yeah.
Just in general?
I should have taped it.
Nabate, please come on the show so I can hear you concede this point.
Well, It wasn't quite a concession. What we talked come on now. What we talked about was he loves the first 4. As anyone who knows who's followed the show, I hate the first 4.
Yes.
I hate it. I think it's absolutely and utterly ridiculous.
Except when Syracuse is in it. So, yes.
Well, the Syracuse is always in it, so that's not. But if you're going to do it, let's do it right. You don't put the conference tournament winner. You put the last 8 at-large teams. That's how you do it. So that way you get your people to watch. And the 15 and 16 seeds should not have to play in. They're in. It should be
I agree
Syracuse's, the Marylands, whoever, because of course that's
UCLA's, the UCLA's, the Michigan State, the big teams that have played on the national stage all year and just got lucky enough to be in the conversation, but not in the tournament yet. I agree with you 100%.
No, the bond is. I realize they're never getting rid of the first four.
No, it's a cash cow. Yeah,
cash cow. But if you're going to do it, let's do it right.
It also gives a reason. It also gives a reason why Dayton's on the map. I mean, for no other reason than they get the first 4 games every year.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. How interesting. I mean, forgetting the Michigan State UCLA game was really good. I mean, nobody knew what it was going to lead. Nobody knew what it was going to lead to. Sorry, I'm realizing my arms are off the.
Nobody knows what they're going to lead to.
So, exactly. No, please stop doing the Macarena. Oh God, please stop. The first 4 is a waste. It's silly, but it is what it is. It's here, so let's make the best out of it. And let's have the teams that really shouldn't be in or just kind of locked in. Let's have them do it as opposed to a conference team, a conference champion that went 22-3, who's earned the right to be there.
Oh, I agree.
I don't think, as for the 7-10, I think it's stupid. I just do. It's stupid. We have a 2-month play. The tournament's different in regards, it's a couple weeks and done. The NBA playoffs are 2.5 months. I don't need to see play-in games for a 2.5-month tournament.
You sure?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. So you have the Sixers at 37-17, the Nets 36-17, and the Bucks 33-20. The Bucks coming in, and then you have a 4-game drop-off. Sorry, 5 right? And then you have the Hawks and the Heat. The Heat seem to have not come together. And in fact, Tyler Hero is, I believe, on the bench right now. And the Heat I don't think the Heat are as good as they were in the bubble. I think they caught a good streak, and that's where they were. I think you have your 3, and first place is pretty damn important because you're not going to see 2 and 3 until the end, especially in the East. I think the West is a little bit different. Are there any teams out of the bottom, let's say 5, that you're actually scared of? So if you're the Sixers, the Nets, the Bucks, are you scared in a 7-game series of the Hawks, the Heat, the Hornets, which makes no sense that they're there, the Celtics, the Knicks, or the Pacers? Does anybody give you pause?
No. First of all, no one gives the Nets pause at all. If the Nets are healthy, they're winning the conference. If Milwaukee, because Giannis has been hurt, if he's injured, first of all, Milwaukee doesn't want to play Miami. We saw this last year. Milwaukee's not as good as last year, even Miami's not as good, but Miami wasn't great during the regular season either.
Well, nobody wants to play Miami. I mean, nobody wants to play much the same way as nobody wants to play Syracuse in the tournament. Nobody wants to play Miami because Miami's defense is just different than everybody else's.
Right. So I don't think anyone has fear of Atlanta. Charlotte's going to fall off the map because Lonzo Ball is now out for the season. Ball's out for the season.
Ball's out.
Ball's out.
Ball's out.
I don't think people would prefer to play the Celtics, but I don't think it's a scary proposition at all because you look at the teams we're talking about. Philly's got Embiid. Boston has no matchup for Embiid.
Correct.
Durant is 7 foot. Boston doesn't have a match. Now, nobody really has a matchup for Durant, but Boston really doesn't have a matchup for Durant. And Boston doesn't have a matchup for Giannis. I mean, there's just, they don't have a matchup. They have no matchup. So I don't think anyone's really scared of Boston. Nobody's scared of the Knicks. The Knicks are a nice story.
Yeah.
Like that they're going to be a 6 seed or a 7 seed is really a reflection on how good a coach Thibodeau is for a team that is really just not that talented. They're just not. And the problem you have is this is what happens with every Thibodeau team. You go up really quick. You except for Minnesota, we don't talk about Minnesota, but you have like a 3-year window with Thibodeau, and then he burns everybody out. But the reality is, I don't think most of the players on this team are going to be on the team in 3 years, so it probably won't matter.
And part of it is, if you look at the stats, and look, we're talking stats, right? We're talking just objective stats. The Knicks have scored only 105 points a game. I mean, the next closest on the low scale is the Cleveland Cavs. The next closest on the high scale is the Detroit Pistons. That's not company you want to be in. Except then when you go to the defensive side, they're at 104 points a game, and they're leading the Eastern Conference. This team is built on defense, which is what most Tom Thibodeau teams are. But they are not scoring at a rate that will allow them to consistently play in playoff games. It's just not going to happen. They're not scoring enough. And where are they going to get their scoring from?
Okay. Dude, your brother is trying to get on the show. Can you send him the link?
I can send him the link. He's
texting me that he's on the video, but I think he's in the wrong area of the video.
My assumption is this is my older brother, not my younger brother. So I will send him the link.
That would be a given. I don't think your brother knows after 9 years that you host a radio show.
That's right. All right, sent. Anyway, Mitch, it's on Facebook if you'd like to join. So you could always go on Facebook. But anyway, so the fact is, so let's move on to the West. So looking at the Western Conference, Utah surprisingly is in the first place. It's in first place. Utah would be the first team since the Pistons. And Mitch, we'll get to you in a second. First team since the Pistons to truly have no first-team All-NBA player, or even perhaps second-team All-NBA player. I mean, Rudy Gobert will probably be on the second team.
Only if they had 3 centers. I mean, because your Embiid and Jokic are 2 of the top 3 for MVP.
Yeah. So they may not have a first or a second team. The Suns are an amazing story. Understand this. I know you don't.
It's all about Jalen Smith.
Who was sent down to the G League.
Yes, he was.
Now, imagine if the Suns had picked Halliburton instead of Jalen Smith, and there you have a different – but I will tell you, it says again not only to the quality of play, but the staying power of one Chris Paul. Chris Paul – is it possible that Chris Paul is underrated?
Possibly.
Because I think he is.
Because I don't even know if he's ever been to a conference final.
He has one. He's played with the Clippers. He played with the Rockets. I'm sorry.
That's right. When they got hurt, when they almost beat Golden State.
Correct. Look at me throwing out NBA knowledge. Look at this.
There you go. I mean, when you go through the all-time great point guards, it's Magic, it's Oscar, and he's kind of a combo-ish. It's Isaiah. I'm not sure Chris Paul's too far off that tier.
But do you think he gets that recognition generally? Like,
no,
you're giving it to him, but I don't think people give him the credit that he's due.
Because he's never been on the great. He's never played in an NBA championship. He's never. I mean, he may be the greatest player of all time, never to play in an NBA final.
Yeah.
He
went. Let's put it this way: he went to Charlotte. I think Charlotte increased by like 15 games. He goes to the Clippers. The Clippers increased by 15 games. He goes to the Rockets. Now, this is not all on him. I get that. The Rockets increased by 15 games. He goes to
Oklahoma City.
He goes to Oklahoma City, the Thunder. They increased by 10 to 15 games. He's gone to the Suns. The Suns have increased by 10 to
37 and 15. I don't know if they've had 38 wins, 37 wins in the last 2 years combined.
Okay, but my point is incredible. If you just said he went to the Suns and made them better, I'd give you that. 7 games to whatever. But Seth, this team without Chris Paul, and Chris Paul is basically Chris Paul and Jay Crowder. are the only two people that are different this year than were on that team last year. They are it. So Jay Crowder is
Smith, baby.
What's that?
Jalen Smith, baby.
They have 38 wins and are in second place.
I don't understand it.
And I'll tell you, that's a team I don't want to play. I don't think
the team you want to play right now is Denver because Murray's out for the year. I think.
Yes.
So he tore his ACL. If
Murray's
out for the year, that team can't win.
That sucks. I mean, since they just traded Gary Harris. I mean, they just traded Gary Harris. They don't have backcourt depth at all. Like the good thing Aaron Gordon was signed with Turner because they're going to need to roll this back again next year because they ain't going to be this year. Not with that team. But the Clippers are in fourth, Nuggets are in fifth, the Lakers are in sixth. My Trailblazers, and I say my Trailblazers because I picked them to go to the conference finals this year, are in sixth. Dallas, unfortunately, is in seventh because the Knicks own their first-round pick. And the Grizzlies are in eighth. The Spurs and Warriors are hanging on at ninth and 10th. Well, let me give you two more players, and then we'll get on to my brother with a little bit of hockey. Who's Damian Lillard?
There is no comparison for before 1990 with Damian Lillard. Doesn't exist.
Okay. Who is Nikolai Jokic? Is that Bill Walton?
That's about as close as you're going to get. A modern variation. I'll think about who a modern day equivalent, who the prior equivalent of Lillard is, but Lillard, he's not the defensive player that Frazier was, but he was a better scorer, and he had
more range.
Yeah, he's a much better scorer. I'm trying to think about and he was similar leader. I think, maybe Monroe is a better.
I was just going to say Monroe. Yeah, I was going to go with Monroe.
That's stretching it to me.
Okay.
Just because, again, Monroe wasn't the leader. Lillard was. Monroe was more of the play. Monroe. I mean, Lillard is so good, and I'm such a big he's my favorite player in the NBA. I love him. Well, I'm also a Blazer fan. But of course, as I wear my old Clippers shirt, and I had to sign a prenup saying I was a Nets fan. But the two teams I've always rooted for, the Nets and the Blazers, because as Sean knows, my favorite player of all time is Drexler. I have to kind of play with who Lillard Maravich, but he's not the passer Maravich was. There's no comparison. He's a different era kind of player. There's just nobody. I don't think there's a comp. I think Monroe is more of a Alonzo Ball, but Monroe is so flashy in the way he passed and the way he did what he did. I don't know if Lillard's is flashy. Lillard's just tough.
Yeah. Okay, I got one more for you before we go to hockey. Kevin Durant.
Come on.
No. I have a guy.
You got a guy.
I got a guy.
You got a guy.
Before
1990.
I got a guy. Let's see if you can pick the guy. I got a guy.
Elgin?
Larry Bird.
Okay.
He makes that team. And when people ask me, and I thought about this a while, Larry Bird made that Celtics team run, basically without a point guard. Because he was such a distributor, such the glue of that team. He could do a little bit of everything and distributed the ball. Without Durant, the Nets are good. They are. They have proved to be good. With Durant, they are an NBA championship team. They are not an NBA championship team without Durant moving that ball. And the offense doesn't work unless Durant is Durant, not just a scorer.
From a shooting capacity, it's the most accurate comparison you're going to have for before 1990. Neither of them were great defensive players. Rebounder, I mean, Bird was a better passer.
And Durant was better on defense. And Durant was better on defense.
Yeah.
Bird
was probably a better rebounder. But I mean, look, if you're putting him in, that's a top 10 all-time player as an equivalent. And I don't think that's bad. I think Durant's right there. At some point we'll probably have to do a top, maybe you and I will revise the top 50 of the NBA of all time, see what they used and see what we can update a little bit, because the list no longer is accurate. But anyway, let's bring your brother on.
Yeah. So and maybe we do that next week. That might be something we look at to do next week. All right, Mitch, you're on. Hey, how you doing with your Islander shirt?
What's up? That's right.
Tell me the truth, Mitch. Is that number 93?
No, it's 13.
I was hoping it would be a Tavares.
If my brother got me.
All right, Mitch.
I don't want to burn my brand new jersey.
No, Mitch, we can't hear you when you keep.
Let me throw this out to you guys. I'm not.
Mitch, you can't hear you, buddy.
Mitch, we can't hear you. No, we cannot hear you. We're going to take you off for a little bit. So anyway, what we're trying, we'll get Mitch back on when he moves into a place that's not blinded by the light and right behind him, and that we can hear him. But we do have Jake on the call. Hi, Jake.
Jake, can you say hi to Uncle Sean?
Hi.
Hey, buddy. So, all right, we'll try. Mitch is gonna, I guess, dial back in. But anyway,
okay.
So Jake, you ready for baseball?
You ready for baseball?
Yeah, my mom is trying to sign me up for baseball.
I know your mom. I know mom.
I heard the Mets are looking for. The Mets will be looking for an outfielder. You want to play for the Mets?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got him as a Mets fan. Woohoo! Jake. Yeah, you see now, Jake. Remember, your favorite color is orange.
Your favorite color is Jake. What's your favorite color? Gray.
Yeah. That doesn't win for either one of us.
They said no kid other than my wife's son ever. His favorite color is gray.
But we will. That's a good project for us for next week. We'll redo the top 50. It gives us a good starting point. We'll both commit to doing 50 names, and we'll see how we come out. And it looks like Mitch has joined us back as soon as he sits down. So we're not seeing his side. All right, so here he is. Hey, bud, how you doing?
What's up?
There you go.
Now I can hear you.
All right. Well, I put it on my laptop instead of my phone.
Okay. Well, that's the price.
Well, here's the question for you guys coming out of basketball, right? Because I get it. Sean and I have this conversation about, older hockey and newer hockey. Would Gretzky score what he does in today's league? And Gretzky even says, no, it's a different game, bigger, faster, stronger, blah, blah, blah. You guys are talking about the greatest guy that's never played in the finals and all that stuff, right? The game, it hasn't basketball changed as much as hockey has changed. I mean, it's a different style of game now, isn't it, comparatively to the Larry Bird and the Abdul-Jabbar and all those times, the greatest of the greats, right? I mean, could those guys do the same thing they're doing today? I mean, sure, you could score a three-pointer, three-pointer didn't change, but driving the basket, being in the lane, doing all those things, hasn't that inherently changed a little bit in the last 30 years?
Well, two things. First of all, the three-pointer now exists, which in some time periods it did not. So back when Oscar Robertson played, and when most of Larry Bird's career, the three-pointer was not a shot that was going to be taken a lot. So Larry Bird shot less three-pointers, I believe, in his whole career than Stephen Curry shoots in half a season. So I mean, so the game has absolutely 100% changed. Seth, I'm not sure Jabbar would be any worse than he is today, because I look at Embiid and I see a lot of Jabbar there. Jabbar certainly had more range than Embiid on certain shots. But that sky hook does not fail.
Wait, you said Jabbar has better range than Embiid?
In certain
He
places.
shoots 40% from 3-point land.
Right, but he doesn't shoot it from straight away. He doesn't shoot from
because nobody shoots. Yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is not on a 3-point shot, but I'm saying on a 20-footer. 20-footer or that sky hook works today the same way as it worked 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
We're bringing it back into hockey, because I got like 5 minutes, right?
Let's go to hockey.
Let's go to hockey. That's all Seth's got. Seth's got 5 minutes for hockey every single week.
Let's make a definitive statement on this show that the Flyers have given up, right?
Okay.
The Flyers are giving up. They traded Raffle, which not Gostisbehere, not a huge player, but still the Flyers being a seller at the deadline means that they have made a decision to give up and screw that. The Rangers, I was shocked that the Rangers weren't a buyer at all. Like you'd think they were moving to something because they're only 4 points behind the Bruins for the last spot now. They're above the Flyers. I'm just shocked that they didn't think about maybe adding someone, but maybe they're happy with what they got. Maybe they're trying to, get the Lafrenières, the playing time to move forward. I'm happy with how the NHL is turning out. I love these divisional games. I love playing every team 8 times. I think it's creating better rivalries now that could have been, in the last couple of years. I think it's great. And I think the winners were certainly everybody in that East Division. They were the winners in the trade deadline.
You got Boston, who got Hall. You guys took all the Devils. By the way, that cracks me up a little bit. I mean, it's where are you guys right now? Do you think I know that. What I'm saying is, do you see yourself as a legitimate threat to the Cup this year?
I don't see it. I don't see us as a legitimate threat. I see us as a half a step behind the major contenders.
With the right bounces, if Tampa Bay loses early, if Toronto loses early, we can look. There are ways that you get surprise teams in conference finals and sometimes in Stanley Cup finals. With the right exit to a better team, we could be there. But we are not the Islanders are not at the start.
You're not the Lightning.
No, nobody's the Lightning. That's the point. I mean, nobody's the Lightning.
Right. But I look through the standings, and I know Colorado has been insanely good this year.
They have.
Right.
And McKinnon is, the team is what the team is. But they're not a team I look at like the Red Wings 15 or the Bruins. Like, they're not a Chicago Blackhawks of 5-7 years ago, a Penguins of 91, 90. They're not that kind of team.
I mean, even
it's scary that much.
I completely agree with you. But every major team in the East made a move, right? Even Pittsburgh brought in Jeff Carter from LA. And he's not Jeff Carter 3 or 4 years ago, but he still could be a scoring presence on Malkin's line. He could still have some oomph going down the stretch. I mean, the Caps made big trades. Bruins, Islanders, Pittsburgh. The East was super active because I still think it's one of the most legitimately highly engaged divisions out of the entire NHL. Buffalo and the Devils notwithstanding. I didn't predict Colorado being in first at this level. I knew that Carolina was going to be good. I didn't know they were going to be this good. No one had the Panthers in second place. I mean, that's at the beginning of the year. In the first 10 games, I think the Bob was getting lambasted by Florida press because he couldn't win a game. So I mean, they've come on strong. But I don't think the Islanders are going to win the whole thing, which sucks because I like the Palmieri deal a lot.
What's not to like? You got yourself a sniper.
Well, he's a rental, so I like him. I would like to keep him. I would like to find a way to keep him, but you can't keep him and bring Anders Lee back. There's just not enough room under the cap at that point, unless we, somehow Andrew Ladd falls off a cliff or something. So there's a little bit of stuff going on there, but I like hockey. Today's hockey it's fun, it's engaging. My mother was over the other day. She says hello, Seth. My mother was over the other day, and we're watching the Islander game. First Islander game my brother, me, and my mom have watched together in years.
Tell me the truth. Did Arlene have a couple drinks to celebrate?
No, she. But we're watching it, and there's a scuffle. I don't remember who was scuffling, but there was a scuffle behind the net or around the net, and my mom goes, "That's not a fight. I know what fights look like. That's not." Right. It's a different game now, and I think that the NHL is doing really well. Sure, there's fights, but I think that the NHL it's a good game. It's a fast-paced game.
Let me ask you something. The big thing with the NHL is starting next year, they're back on ESPN, which will be enormous for them. Because really, let's be honest, other than the playoffs and the occasional Saturday night game, unless you're a diehard, no one casually is watching on NBCSN. Or does not. Baseball, for all intents and purposes, seems to have fallen apart. They can't get themselves out. You're not catching up to the NBA. You're not catching up to the NHL. With such a decreased popularity of baseball, and their new TV contracts can take a hit. Is there any chance that you guys can become the number 3 sport? I don't think so, simply because of the seasonality of it, where you have the spring and summer where there's no competition and hockey's going against, football in the beginning and the NBA at the end. But can you make a dent?
I think so. I think the way that I want to be honest in this question. I mean, obviously, from a Canadian perspective, if I was a Canadian coming in, I'd be like, we're already, the number number 1, whatever it is. But baseball is a boring sport, and I find that it's boring to go to the stadium, and it's even more boring to watch it on TV. It's definitely not a fast-paced game. I think in today's world, in the instant gratification world, in the social media world, and the messages going back and forth, you're always trying to text someone. I think people are looking for a faster-paced game, a faster result game. And if you can get a hockey game in an hour and 20 minutes, including the intermissions, comparatively to a baseball game where you're looking at a 2.5-hour game kind of thing, I think that people are going to be more engaged at a faster pace. They go to a bar, they go to a restaurant, they're watching, and they're like, oh my God, it's 20 minutes. Wow, that's a really fast-paced game. I watched the game with the Islanders in Pittsburgh where there were 2 whistles in 20 minutes. And it was only because the puck went over the net. So, I mean, if you're talking about a fast-paced game, yeah, I definitely think it can start moving forward. I don't know. Baseball has been an integral part of the American life for 100 years, but the way we're seeing the NHL set up today with this new divisional rivalry thing going on, I think it's creating more fans geographically and regionally than ever before. I think people are actively looking forward to watching the Islanders play the Bruins, a team that's been in a different division this entire time. I mean, we're creating a better relationship with our regional and geographical partners than we did in the past. Why wasn't Buffalo part of our division? I mean, as a New York team, because they're up in Canada. They're with the Canadian teams.
They would argue that. They would argue that they're part of Canada.
No, I'm saying but they're part of that geographic range where you have Toronto and Ottawa and Buffalo and Boston, and they're in that area in the Northeast. They're not part of the Metro division. So I think that coming forward, we're looking at some great hockey. I think the Stanley Cup will be incredibly fast. I think you'll see some crazy hits. I think that you're gonna really see a different kind of Stanley Cup playoff run this year, because there's a lot of you'll have the taxi squads will still be in effect, so you have some backups that you can bring in. You're not afraid. You're not afraid to be a little bruisey. And I think you're going to see some great goaltending. And I'm a big fan. So yeah.
All right, Mitch, we got to go. We got 5 more minutes to go. Thanks a lot.
Peace out.
Good seeing you, buddy.
So anyway, that was my brother Mitch. Always a pleasure having him on to talk hockey, especially when he wears the jersey. The Islanders don't play again until Thursday, but
I'll be setting the DVR.
As you should be. Let's understand that because the Devils got nobody left. They're all on the Islanders. So anyway,
I'm just ready for the draft.
Yeah,
I'm practicing my simulations for the draft.
I understand. So last 5 minutes, if you wish, go right ahead. If you want to go second, that is fine.
You can start.
Okay. So yesterday again, we've seen more and more of the same, and I'll say it again, crap. We see more and more of the same. You want to say it? Shit. We do. Another gentleman, Dante Wright, is shot at a traffic stop on Sunday afternoon in Minnesota. A police officer mistakenly fired her firearm instead of her taser. This is all happening at the same time as the trial in Minnesota. This needs to stop. And I don't look, if it comes out that it is mistaken as a taser versus a gun, and it truly is mistaken, mistakes are made. I'm okay with that. I truly am that mistakes are made. But this crap has just got to stop. I want, and the reason why this relates to sports is that because we have 2 postponements because of it. Sports don't matter, guys. With respect to this has just got to stop. It's crap. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of waking up every day seeing this crap.
So
on that note, go right ahead.
Speaking of sick of waking up and seeing crap, in the last year we've seen 2 ridiculous comments, one from Deshaun Jackson, one from Myers Leonard, pretty much, anti-Semitic at a minimum. And the one athlete who has stood out, who is Julian Edelman, who announced his retirement yesterday, a guy who was a 7th-round quarterback from Kent State, who turned into one of the greatest clutch receivers in the history of the NFL. He won't be, I don't think he's not a Hall of Famer, but there have been very few people other than the 3 or 4 obvious namesakes in New England who have been as influential on the team and have been as impactful impactful in the Super Bowl in this 20-year Super Bowl era as Julian Edelman. Sean's, as a Jets fan, Sean's not going to miss him. As a Giant fan, I'm not going to miss him.
You want him. You don't care.
I don't care. As one of the few Jews in the NFL, I would like to have seen him continue going, but he deserves at least, you talk about a guy who got the best out of what he had. You don't say that about everyone, but you can say that about Julian Edelman.
No, and I'm actually waiting for his replacement because before him it was Wes Welker, and before him it was Troy Brown. So they've gotten 3 consecutive slot guys who were Welker was like a 7th-round pick out of Texas Tech. Troy Brown was like a 6th-round pick, and then you had Edelman, who's undrafted. I want to see who New England comes up with a slot guy again that I can curse out every single time. That why are you letting that guy beat us?
Well, here's the whole reason why, because you have no cornerbacks, and that's why you need them.
Myers. It's time for Jacoby Myers to reign supreme, not the Jacoby Myers that has the 1-800 number on Long Island, though. Get yourself now. So next week we're going to do the top 50 NBA players. We're gonna get that done. So damn it, I had it. That's Seth Kamens. I'm Sean Palmer. Seth and Sean Sports Radio. And we're not even radio anymore. Seth and Sean Sports. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks to everybody for joining in. See ya.
Have a good one.